Every story leaves something behind. A whisper, a shadow, a question that was never answered. Here, we dig through the forgotten files, the unsolved mysteries, the chilling true crimes, and the horrors people wish had stayed buried. From haunted legends to real-life nightmares, every tale is pulled straight from the horror archives. So turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and step carefully, because once a story enters the horror archives, it never truly leaves. This video has 5 true horror stories from people who booked vacation rentals and found something deeply wrong waiting for them inside. These are all submitted by viewers, and as always, these are their words. The first story is called The Clock That Gained an Hour. This one is subtle at first. A couple rents a cabin by a lake in Michigan, and they notice something off about the clocks. All of them. It starts as a minor annoyance and becomes something much harder to explain. The microwave clock said 3:14 a.m. My phone said 2:14 a.m. I figured it was a time zone thing. Maybe the owner hadn't adjusted it. But the stove clock also said 3:14, and the clock on the wall in the hallway, and the one on the nightstand in the bedroom. Every single clock in that cabin was exactly 1 hour ahead. My girlfriend and I had rented a lakeside A-frame in northern Michigan for a long weekend in October. It was one of those places that looked perfect in the listing photos: knotty pine walls, a stone fireplace, big windows facing the water. When we arrived that Friday evening, everything matched the pictures. The air smelled like cedar and wood smoke. The lake was so still it looked like poured glass. The first night was fine. We grilled steaks, drank wine, went to bed early. I only noticed the clock thing because I woke up thirsty around 2 in the morning and went to the kitchen for water. After I noticed it, I just shrugged and went back to sleep. The next morning, I mentioned it to Sarah. She checked her phone and then the microwave. Now the microwave said 9:47. Her phone said 8:47. Still exactly 1 hour ahead. She laughed and said the owner probably just never fixed the clocks after daylight saving time. That made sense. I let it go, but that afternoon, something small started bothering me. I was sitting on the dock reading, and I realized I could hear a clock ticking, not faintly, clearly, like it was right next to me. I looked around. There was nothing on the dock, no clock on the exterior of the cabin that I could see. I went back inside and the ticking was everywhere, which made sense because there were analog clocks in almost every room. I counted them. There were 9 clocks in a 2-bedroom cabin. That struck me as excessive, but I told myself the owner was just one of those people. That night, we watched a movie on my laptop. Around 11, Sarah went to bed. I stayed up a little longer. When I finally shut the laptop and stood up, every clock in the cabin read 1:04 a.m. My phone read 11:54 p.m. The gap had grown. They were now an hour and 10 minutes ahead. I stood there staring at the kitchen clock for a long time. The second hand moved normally. Tick, tick, tick. Steady. I watched it for a full minute and timed it against my phone. 60 seconds on my phone equaled 60 seconds on the clock. It wasn't running fast. It was just ahead, like it was set to a different time. A time that kept pulling further and further away from mine. I barely slept that night. I kept waking up and checking. At 3 a.m. on my phone, the clock said 4:17. At 5 a.m. they said 6:41. The gap was widening by roughly 8 minutes every hour. By morning, the clocks were nearly 3 hours ahead of my phone. Sarah thought I was being obsessive. She said maybe my phone was wrong. I showed her a time website on my laptop. My phone was accurate. The cabin clocks were diverging from real time at an accelerating rate. I messaged the owner through the app. I said something casual like, "Hey, your clocks seem to be off." He responded within a few minutes. His reply was just one line. It said, "Don't try to set them back." No explanation, no pleasantry, just that. I stared at the message for a while, and then I did something I probably shouldn't have. I reached up and adjusted the kitchen clock. I pulled the minute hand back to match my phone. The second I let go, the ticking stopped. Every clock in the cabin went silent at the same time. The silence was worse. It was total. I couldn't even hear the lake anymore. Sarah called out from the bedroom asking what happened. I told her nothing. I stared at the kitchen clock. The hands weren't moving. Then, very slowly, the second hand started going backward. I grabbed Sarah and told her we were leaving. She thought I was losing it, but she saw my face and didn't argue. We packed in maybe 10 minutes and drove to a motel 40 miles south. I never contacted the owner again. He never contacted me. But here's the thing that still keeps me up at night. When we were packing, I glanced at the hallway clock one last time. All the hands were spinning backward, fast, like a time lapse in reverse. And the time on the face, it was showing yesterday's date. I don't know how I knew that from an analog clock, but I looked at it and I knew, in my gut, it was going backward through the day we'd already lived, and it wasn't slowing down. The next story was sent in by a man who was in Savannah, Georgia, for a work trip. He calls it the rental with 2 locks. The detail that stayed with me on this one is what he found under the stairs. The front door had 2 deadbolts. One of them I had a key for. The other one I didn't. I was staying at a rental house in Savannah, Georgia, for a work conference. It was a narrow townhouse on a quiet side street, the kind with wrought iron railings and crumbling brick and Spanish moss hanging off everything. Inside it was clean and modern. Exposed brick, white countertops, a spiral staircase up to the loft bedroom. Nice place, good reviews. The host had left a lockbox code and a welcome note on the counter. The welcome note was normal, except for one line at the bottom. It said, "The top lock is not for guests. Please do not attempt to use it." I figured it was the owner's personal lock for when the place wasn't being rented. Maybe they stored things between guests and wanted an extra layer of security. I didn't think much of it. The bottom deadbolt worked fine with my key. I settled in. The first 2 nights were uneventful. I'd come back from the conference around 6, order food, work on my laptop, go to sleep in the loft. The neighborhood was quiet, almost too quiet for Savannah, actually. I never saw anyone on my street after dark. On the 3rd night I came home, and the top deadbolt was locked. I know this because I tried the door and it wouldn't open. My key turned the bottom lock just fine. I could feel the bolt retract, but the door wouldn't budge. Something else was holding it. I pushed harder. Nothing. I looked at the top lock. The keyhole was horizontal, which meant the bolt was engaged. I hadn't locked it. I didn't have a key for it. No one should have been inside. I called the host. No answer. I texted. No response. I stood on the front steps for 20 minutes trying to figure out what to do. I was about to call the police when I heard the deadbolt turn from inside. A heavy clunk. Then nothing. No footsteps. No voice. Just the sound of the lock releasing. I should have left. I know that, but my laptop was in there. All my work files, my clothes, everything. I pushed the door open slowly. The house was dark. I turned on every light. I checked every room, every closet, the bathroom, under the bed in the loft. No one was there. The back door was locked from the inside with a chain. The windows were all latched. There was no way in or out that I could see. I barely slept. I pushed the couch against the front door and kept the lights on. In the morning, I checked the top deadbolt. It was unlocked. I examined it closely and realized something. The keyhole was on both sides of the door. That meant it could be locked from inside or outside. Someone with a key could lock me in or lock me out. I messaged the host again. This time he replied. He said, "I told you not to use that lock." I wrote back that I hadn't used it, that someone else had locked it from inside while I was out. He read the message. No response. That night I stayed at a hotel. I went back to the townhouse the next morning to get my things. When I opened the front door, the first thing I noticed was the smell. It was faint, organic, stale, like old clothes or sweat. It hadn't been there before. I grabbed my bags quickly. As I was leaving, I looked at the spiral staircase and noticed something I'd missed every other day. There was a small door built into the wall beneath the stairs. It was painted the same color as the wall, nearly invisible. It had a lock on it. A deadbolt, the same brand as the one on the front door. I didn't open it. I left, checked out through the app, and drove to the airport 3 hours early. I sat in the terminal and kept refreshing the listing page. The reviews were all 5 stars, but I noticed something. Every single review was from a one-time account. No profile photos, No other reviews. Every guest had only ever stayed at that one property. The listing is still active. I check sometimes. The photos look the same. Exposed brick, white countertops. You can see the spiral staircase in one of them. If you look closely at the wall beneath it, you can just barely make out the outline of that little door. Story number 3 takes place in a high-rise condo on the Gulf Coast. The person who sent this in titled it The Voice in the Baby Monitor. It starts with a small, strange discovery in a bedroom closet and ends with a window that shouldn't have anyone standing in it. We found a baby monitor in the bedroom closet. It was on and the green light was blinking, and through the static I could hear someone breathing. My wife and I had rented a beachfront condo in Gulf Shores, Alabama, for our anniversary. It was a high-rise unit on the 14th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, white tile, that generic coastal decor with seahorse prints and driftwood frames. We arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. The unit was clean. Everything looked fine. Emma was unpacking in the bedroom when she found the monitor on the top shelf of the closet, tucked behind some extra pillows. It was a standard video baby monitor, the parent unit, with a small screen. She brought it out and showed me. The screen was dark, but the power light was green, and there was audio coming through. Low, rhythmic breathing. Not loud, just present. We assumed a previous guest had left it, and the camera unit was somewhere else in the condo, maybe picking up ambient noise. We looked around for the camera. We couldn't find it. We checked every room, every shelf, every surface. No camera unit anywhere in the condo. That meant the camera was somewhere else. Another unit, maybe. These monitors have limited range. It had to be close, maybe the unit next door, or above or below us. A family with a baby who didn't realize their monitor was transmitting to a second parent unit left behind by another guest. I was about to turn it off when Emma said wait. She was listening. The breathing had changed. It was faster now, and then it stopped, and very clearly through the monitor, a voice whispered, "They are here." We both froze. The voice was male, flat effect, no emotion, just a statement, "They are here." Then the breathing resumed, slow and steady. I turned the monitor off immediately. Emma wanted to leave right then. I said let's just report it to the host and move on. I messaged the host, described the monitor, asked if they knew about it. The host responded quickly and said it wasn't their property. They'd never seen it before. They asked me to leave it on the kitchen counter, and they'd have someone pick it up. We put it on the counter and tried to enjoy our evening. We went to dinner, walked the beach, came back around 9. The monitor was still on the counter where we'd left it, but it was turned back on. Green light blinking, and the screen was active this time. The image was dark and grainy, but I could make out a room. It looked like a bedroom. There was a bed and what looked like a dresser or nightstand. The angle was high, like the camera was mounted near the ceiling. And on the bed, I could see a shape. A person lying still, facing the camera. I looked more closely. The room on the screen had the same layout as our bedroom. Same window placement. Same position of the bed relative to the door. But the walls were a different color. Darker. And there were things on the walls that I couldn't quite make out. Papers or photos pinned up in clusters. The person on the bed sat up. Slowly, they were looking directly into the camera. I couldn't see features, just a dark silhouette. They raised one hand and pointed. Not at the camera, past it, through it, like they were pointing at me through the screen. Emma grabbed the monitor and threw it off the balcony, 14 floors down. I heard it shatter on the pool deck below. We didn't sleep that night. We sat in the living room with every light on. In the morning, I went down to the pool deck to find the monitor. There was nothing there. No plastic, no glass, no debris. I asked the front desk if maintenance had cleaned it up. They said no one had reported anything. We checked out that morning. As we were loading the car in the parking garage, Emma grabbed my arm and pointed up at the building. She was counting floors. She pointed to the 14th floor, to our unit. Then she pointed one floor up, the 15th floor. The window directly above our unit was open, and there was someone standing in it, just standing there, looking down at us. I couldn't see a face. We got in the car and left. I looked up the building later. There is no 15th floor unit above ours. That section of the 15th floor is listed as a mechanical room. Not residential, not accessible to guests, but someone was in that window. Someone who had a camera pointed at our bedroom. Someone who knew the moment we arrived. And I think about the monitor, how it was on the top shelf, behind the pillows, positioned exactly where you'd find it on the first night, but not right away. Almost like someone wanted you to find it after you'd already been there long enough to be watched. This next story is one of the more unsettling ones I've received. It was submitted by a man who rented a cabin outside Asheville after going through a difficult time in his life. He was alone. The cabin was remote, and every night at 3:07 a.m., the shower turned on by itself. He calls it the shower that ran at 3 a.m. The shower turned on by itself at exactly 3:07 a.m. for 3 nights in a row. On the 4th night, it didn't turn on. That was worse. I was staying alone in a cabin outside Asheville, North Carolina. I'd booked it for a full week. I was going through a divorce and I just needed to be somewhere quiet. The cabin was small, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, up a gravel road about a mile from the nearest neighbor, surrounded by rhododendron and old-growth hardwoods. At night, it was the kind of dark where you can't see your hand in front of your face. The first night, I was exhausted from the drive. I went to bed around 10 and woke up to the sound of running water. I lay there for a minute thinking I'd left a faucet on. Then I realized it was the shower. I could hear the specific spray pattern hitting the tile and the tub floor. I checked my phone, 3:07 a.m. I got up and walked to the bathroom. The door was closed. I'd left it open. I pushed it open and the shower was running. Full blast hot water. The mirror was fogged, the whole room was steamy. I turned it off. The handle was one of those single lever types. It was pulled all the way out and turned to hot. I pushed it back in, stood there for a minute, dripping with condensation. Then I went back to bed and told myself it was a plumbing issue. The next night, same thing, 3:07 a.m. Shower running, bathroom door closed, room full of steam. This time I noticed something I'd missed before. When I opened the door, the steam swirled, and for just a moment in the fogged mirror, I thought I saw a handprint. Not mine, I hadn't touched the mirror. It was lower than where my hand would naturally fall, smaller, like a child's hand. I wiped the mirror and it was gone. I turned off the shower and sat on the couch until morning. The 3rd night, I decided to stay awake. I sat in the living room with the bathroom door propped open so I could see straight inside. At 3:05, I was staring at the dark bathroom. At 3:06, nothing happened. At 3:07, the shower lever moved on its own. I watched it. It didn't jerk or pop. It pulled outward slowly, like someone was gripping it and turning it with deliberate care. Water started flowing. Steam began to rise, and the bathroom door, which I had propped open with a boot, started to close. The boot slid across the tile like it was being pushed. The door clicked shut. I didn't open it. I sat on the couch and listened to the shower run for 45 minutes. Then it turned off on its own. I heard the lever push back in. Then I heard a sound I hadn't heard before. It was the shower curtain being pulled back, the metal rings scraping along the rod, one by one. Slow, like someone was stepping out. Then footsteps, wet footsteps on tile, 2, 3, 4 steps. Then they stopped, right on the other side of the bathroom door. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I stared at the gap under the door. The hall light was on, so I could see the thin line of tile at the base. And then I saw water. A thin line of water crept out from under the door and spread across the hardwood. Not a puddle, a trail, like someone was standing there dripping. I sat there for an hour. Eventually, the water stopped spreading. I didn't open the door until morning. When I did, the bathroom was dry, completely dry. No water on the floor, no steam, no fog on the mirror. The shower curtain was pulled closed. The boot I'd used as a doorstop was back in the hallway by the front door, where I'd originally left it when I arrived. The 4th night, the shower didn't turn on. I lay in bed waiting for it. 3:07 came and went. 3:15, 3:30, silence. I almost felt relieved. Then at 3:48, I heard the bathroom door open on its own. Slow creak, then wet footsteps on hardwood. Not in the bathroom this time. In the hallway, coming toward the bedroom. I pulled the covers over my head like I was 5 years old. The footsteps stopped at the bedroom door. I could hear dripping, slow, steady dripping on the wood floor. And then I heard breathing. Not mine, someone else in the room, breathing slow and wet, like their lungs were full of water. I don't remember falling asleep. I must have. When I woke up, it was daylight. The bedroom floor was dry, but the pillow next to mine, the one on the empty side of the bed, had a damp spot in the center. The shape of it was roughly oval, about the size of a face. I packed everything and left within 20 minutes. I drove 2 hours before I stopped. When I got home, I looked at the listing one more time. In the description, under the house rules section, there was a line I'd skimmed past before. It said, "The bathroom door may close on its own due to the slope of the cabin." This is normal, but it didn't say anything about the shower. It didn't explain the footsteps, and it definitely didn't explain the damp impression on the pillow, the one that was still cold when I touched it. This last story is the hardest one in this video to share. It was submitted by 2 friends who rented a farmhouse in rural Ohio for a hunting trip. What they found in the attic, I'll let you hear it for yourself. They call it the guest who was still there. There were fingernail marks on the inside of the attic hatch. Deep ones, dozens of them, layered on top of each other, some of them dark with what I hope was rust. I noticed them on my last day. I wish I'd noticed them on my first. My friend Marcus and I rented a farmhouse in rural Ohio for a weekend hunting trip. It was a big property, 2 stories, a wraparound porch, sitting on about 40 acres of fallow fields and thin woods. The listing said it was a historic homestead, built in the 1890s, recently renovated. The photos showed a clean, bright interior, shiplap walls, modern kitchen. It looked like a magazine. What the photos didn't show was the smell. When we walked in Friday afternoon, there was a sweet, cloying odor underneath the artificial lavender of whatever air freshener the host had used. Marcus said it smelled like something had died in the walls. Probably a raccoon or a possum, he said. Country houses get that. We opened the windows and lit a candle and moved on. The first thing that bothered me was the trail camera. There was one mounted to a tree at the edge of the yard, aimed at the house. I assumed it was for wildlife. The host mentioned deer on the property, but the angle was wrong. It wasn't pointed at the tree line or the field. It was pointed directly at the front porch. At the front door, I mentioned it to Marcus. He shrugged. Maybe the owner wanted to monitor the property between guests. Made sense. But when I walked closer to look at the camera, I noticed something. The little red indicator light was solid, not blinking. It was recording, not motion activated, continuously recording. That night we grilled and drank beer on the porch. Around 10, Marcus went to bed in the downstairs bedroom. I took the upstairs room. The stairs were original, narrow and steep, creaking with every step. My bedroom was at the end of a short hallway. At the other end of the hallway was a small door in the ceiling with a pull-down cord. The attic, I slept fine until around 2 a.m. when I woke up to a sound above me. Not footsteps, more like dragging. Something heavy being pulled slowly across the attic floor, directly over my bed. It lasted about 30 seconds and then stopped. I assumed it was an animal, raccoon, possum, something that got in through the eaves. I made a mental note to tell the host and went back to sleep. The dragging happened again the next night. Same time, same duration, same location, directly above my bed. This time I got up and walked to the hallway. I pulled the cord on the attic hatch. The door folded down and a wooden ladder extended. A wave of hot, stale air came down with it. And that smell, the sweet one from downstairs, was concentrated up there. Thick, almost physical. I didn't go up. I don't know why. Something in me just said don't. I pushed the ladder back up and closed the hatch. When I grabbed the hatch to push it closed, that's when I felt them. Grooves in the wood on the inside face of the door. I shined my phone light on it and saw the scratches. Fingernail marks. Not a few. Dozens and dozens. Concentrated around the latch mechanism. Someone had scratched at that door from the inside. Desperately, for a long time, I went downstairs and woke Marcus. I told him what I'd found. He was skeptical, but he came upstairs. We both looked at the scratches. He got quiet, Then he shined his light up past the open hatch into the attic space. The beam lit up the rafters and the plywood floor. In the middle of the attic, about 8 feet from the hatch, there was a mattress. A bare-stained mattress on the floor. Next to it was a bucket. Next to the bucket was a chain. One end was bolted to a rafter. The other end had a cuff. It was open. Empty. Marcus said, "We need to leave right now." I agreed. We grabbed our bags and went downstairs. As we passed through the living room, Marcus stopped and pointed at the wall. There was a framed photo I hadn't looked at closely before. It showed the farmhouse in what looked like summer. Standing on the porch was a man. The host. I recognized him from his profile picture. He was smiling, and standing slightly behind him, almost out of frame, was another person. Younger, thinner, not smiling. Their eyes were wrong, flat, vacant, looking at nothing. We drove to the nearest gas station, which was 20 minutes away, and called the police. They said they'd check it out. I gave them the address. The officer paused and said they'd had calls about that property before, but could never get a warrant. He said the owner was known in the area. He said it like that meant something specific. I followed up twice. The first time, they said they'd visited the property and found nothing unusual. No mattress, no chain, no bucket. The attic was empty, clean. The second time I called, the officer I'd originally spoken to was no longer with the department, and no one had a record of my report. The listing stayed up for another 6 months. Then it disappeared. Not deleted, just gone. The host's profile is gone too. No trace of it. But the thing that keeps me awake isn't the chain or the scratches or the mattress. It's the dragging sound. The sound I heard above my bed on both nights. The heavy, slow dragging that lasted 30 seconds and then stopped. I thought it was an animal, but when I picture that mattress and that chain and the length of it, I think someone was up there. I think they were pulling themselves across the floor toward the hatch. And I think the reason the dragging stopped was because they reached the end of the chain. That's going to do it for this video. If you have a true scary story you'd like to share, send it to me. And as always, stay safe out there.
And that's where tonight's file closes, but the archives are far from empty. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more horrors, mysteries, and true crimes hidden in the horror archives. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep listening, because you never know what story we'll uncover next.